Thank you. Okay, I'll start that over. Good evening, everyone. My name is Marguerite Anglin, and I'm the Public Art Director for the City of Philadelphia. Welcome to Public Art How to Start, a professional development series for emerging artists. I am excited to kick off our first workshop in this series with our guest artist joining me tonight, Linda Fernandez of Amber Art and Design. This program is brought to you by the City of Philadelphia's Office of Arts, Culture, and the Creative Economy, the stewards of Philadelphia's collection of over 1,000 works of public art located in every neighborhood of the city. This extraordinary collection reflects Philadelphia's rich history and many diverse communities. The purpose of this quarterly workshop series is to demystify the public art process, especially for local and emerging artists in Philadelphia who are interested in competing for a public art opportunity, but don't know what a public art project involves or how to start. And we know there's also an underrepresentation of local, diverse artists creating public art in Philadelphia. So we want to increase the capacity of artists who can apply for public art opportunities in the city of Philadelphia and beyond, so that they feel comfortable, everyone feels comfortable applying. Each workshop in this series will present a different topic, such as how to compete for a public art opportunity, how to develop a budget, how to engage the community in the development of the art, and much more. Each workshop will feature a different guest artist who will share their insights and lessons learned along their public art journey. And the workshops will also include a brief overview of the city's Percent for Art program, as well as upcoming public art opportunities. Tonight's workshop is really an introduction. It's an introduction to public art, and our guest Linda Fernandez will share from her many experiences in the public art world, such as the differences between studio artwork and art that's created for public spaces. And so I am really looking forward to tonight's discussion with Linda, and I know that by the end of the night, you'll have a better understanding of the public art process, and you'll also leave with some tools and tips for navigating a public art project. Next slide, please. Just some housekeeping. So during the Q&A portion at the end, we will invite you to ask questions by clicking the raise your hand feature so you can be unmuted. And we also ask that all questions be brief and limited to the topic of this meeting to allow everyone to participate. Next slide, please. Okay, so there may be a range of experience levels in the audience tonight. So I have some quick poll questions for you now that should help us understand who's in the room. And a poll should have popped up on your screen right now. If you could interact with that and answer those simple questions. One, are you a visual artist? Yes or no? Two, have you ever participated in a public art project before? And three, have you ever applied to a Percent for Art project with the City of Philadelphia? And when you finish clicking your answers, make sure you hit submit so that can be included.
We'll give about another 20 seconds here. And okay, so we're going to end the poll, and then here are the results.
All right. So it looks like most of you are visual artists who are in the room here. And it's almost split, kind of leaning toward 55% have participated in the creation of a public art project before. However, majority of you have never applied to a Percent for Art project before with the City of Philadelphia. So this is actually great. You know, like I said, we are really excited to bring this program to you and to this series to you, because what we're hoping is that you'll be able to leave here with a wealth of information, not just in this session, but in the sessions that are to come, that will equip you and encourage you to apply for a Percent for Art project with the City of Philadelphia. Next slide, please. So before I get into tonight's conversation with our guest, I'd like to give you a brief overview of the city's Percent for Art program, which is the primary way that the City of Philadelphia commissions public art. The Office of Arts, Culture, and the Creative Economy frequently announces public art opportunities and competitions through its open call for artists process to attract a wide variety of original design ideas and creative expressions to become part of Philadelphia's permanent public art collection. And the mission of the program is to provide beautiful and long-lasting artwork throughout public spaces of Philadelphia that reflect the city's diverse people, culture, and history. The city's collection of over 1,000 public artworks span from indoor to outdoor locations and include a multitude of mediums, as you can see here, such as sculptures, monuments, wall and ceiling installations, mosaics, murals, sculptural seating, lighting installations, and more. Next slide, please. So city-funded construction projects trigger Percent for Art, which requires that 1% of the project budget for a city-funded construction project be designated to site-specific public art. And all of that funding goes directly to the selected artists who may be emerging or established in their career. And that selected artist is responsible for the design, fabrication, and installation of the artwork with support from OACCE, the Office of Arts, Culture, and the Creative Economy. And community involvement is vital to the process to ensure that the art is a true and meaningful reflection of the community. Next slide, please. So the open call for artists is a two-part competition consisting of part one, the call for artists, where interested artists submit an application with their qualifications and any past work. Applications are narrowed down into a smaller group of semifinalists who will move on to the next stage of the competition, part two, semifinalist proposals. And so 3 to 5 semifinalists who are selected by the committee will create and propose original designs which are voted on by the public. And a finalist is selected by the Percent for Art Committee and ultimately is approved by the Philadelphia Art Commission. Also, Philadelphia's call for artist opportunities and competitions are open to all interested artists to apply, but local artists and artists who reflect the diversity of the city are prioritized. But again, any artist may apply. Okay, so that's just a quick overview of the city's Percent for Art process and program. And with that, I'd like to introduce Linda Fernandez. Next slide, please. So Linda Fernandez is with the artist collective Amber Art and Design, who has created beautiful and engaging public artwork. Linda has done this work for over 15 years throughout Philadelphia and beyond. And so we're about to have this conversation with Linda. And Linda, I'm so excited to do that. Can we have our next slide, please? Linda, while we're doing that, can you tell us a little bit more about yourself, what you do in the public art sphere, and how you got started as a public artist?
Yes, and thank you for having me tonight, Marguerite. I'm just going to apologize really quickly because I'm at my studio tonight. We're up in Harrogate, so there may be lots of noises, the train, or some loud music at any given point. So apologies for that in advance. But my story, how I got started, well, when I was in school, I went to Temple University and I was a art education major. And I was working at a school. It was my last semester. I was at Stern Elementary School, and there was a mural being painted at that school with the mural arts program. I hadn't heard of the mural arts program prior to being at that school, but I knew that when I saw what was happening, I wanted to be involved. So I asked if I could volunteer and be involved. And in addition to being a full-time student and then teaching full-time as part of my student teaching experience, I was also volunteering on this mural, and I just loved it so much. The way that kids could get involved and teachers were getting involved. I was just so drawn to that process. And afterwards, I followed up with Mural Arts and I asked them, can I intern? Can I volunteer? And so I started interning with Mural Arts in the office. And then eventually I started teaching with them as a teaching artist and working as an assistant muralist. And I did that for a couple of years. Then in 2008, I left the country and I went to Spain. I went to Barcelona, and I really wanted to develop my skills as a muralist. I was like, I'm going to be a muralist and I want to be a lead muralist. And so I enrolled into this program for contemporary art at a school called Metafora in Barcelona. And it was a year-long contemporary art program, and it was international. So there was 25 people from all different countries, ranging in age from like 18 to 65. And I painted one mural there, and then they really challenged me to try different mediums. So I worked in video, I worked in installation, I worked in sculpture, and just expanded what I thought I was there for. And I think that really changed my perspective in terms of how I see myself as an artist, because I was challenged to try different medium. But following that, I went to Nicaragua for a year, and I just continued to paint murals. I was working with kids. I was just any opportunity that I could find to paint, I would. And I was meeting a lot of nonprofit organizations, people who worked at nonprofits, and I would just ask them, do you want a mural? And they would say, yeah, we would love one. So I would just say, can you buy me the paint and I'll be there and we'll work with your kids. So I did a couple murals there. Then when I came back to Philly, I came back the following year and I reconnected with some of the artists that I had met when I was working at Mural Arts. And that's Kiera Johnston, Ernell Martinez, Charles Barbin, and the late Willis Humphrey. They were working on the Roots mural at that time. And they had already started to think about this idea of forming a collective because they were sharing a studio space and they were working on this big project all together. And it was just really perfect timing for me because I was looking for a studio space. They were eager to have somebody also come in and be a part of that space, share space in their studio. And so they invited me to be a part of this brand new collective that they were starting called Amber Art and Design. And from there, that was 10 years ago, and we've just grown ever since. So that very first project was the Roots mural. And then from there, we've done several other types of projects where murals are a component, but not always. Some of our projects have been about food and community meals. Some of our projects have been more performance-based. So our work takes different forms, and usually it's really just connected to the needs and interests of the particular community that we're working with.
Oh, thank you for sharing that. I love your journey, and I love that you're talking about all the different mediums that your work and different forms that your work takes. And it's really a good segue into my next question for you. You know, people have such different views, I think, on what public art is and what it should be. And you're a muralist, for example, right? But there are so many different forms and expressions of public art. How do you define public art, and why do you choose to do it?
I think public art is work that's happening in public spaces. So I think it could be a mural, it could be a sculpture, it could be a performance, it could be temporary, or it could be more permanent or semi-permanent. I've also started to think about public art in terms of community gardens. So my view is very expansive. I think that public art can really be a lot of different things. But to me, the most important thing is that it's taking place in public spaces and that the people who live and work in those spaces are involved in the process in some way, whether it's the ideation or the design or the fabrication, but ultimately these are works that exist for people in these public spaces to learn from, to enjoy, to experience. And so that's kind of how I view it.
That's a great definition. And I think, you know, there's so many things that a public artist has to consider when you're not creating just for yourself or creating in a studio or creating for a gallery. I mean, exactly what you're saying. Public art is for the public, you know? And so when you're doing that, you're creating art in public spaces. That's so different from studio artwork. There's so many things that a public artist has to consider about the site, about the community, the people that the art is for. You know, really that artist is a you know, is a vessel really to communicate the voice, you know, of the community through art, to tell those stories. What do you think are some important skills that a public artist needs to have, maybe different from, you know, a studio artist, in order to create successful public art projects that speak for communities?
Yeah, I think you just kind of touched on one of those skills, is really being able to listen. Because as a public artist, you are not painting anything that you want. You really have to listen to what the community wants. And you obviously take your skills as an artist and your style, but you really have to be open to the interests of the community. And also public art tells a story. So as you're listening and as you are taking in all this information, you have to think about, how can you tell this story? How can you represent the story of a community? And how can you do it in a way that is universal, that, you know, can be easily understood? And sometimes language is a part of that, but that also creates barriers in terms of language access. So as a visual artist, you know, we're really trying to use imagery to tell a story that can be understood by almost anyone. But I think there's like a lot of different skills, and I wrote some of them down. So I'm a very organized person, but organization is one of the skills. I think that these projects take a lot of planning, and you need to be prepared. You need to be well organized. You are likely going to need to have a team in place. So just being as organized as you can, so that you can be a good leader for your team and you can execute this project well from start until finish. I think flexibility is also really important, because when you're working in public spaces, you just don't have control over anything. You're outside of your studio, so you have to deal with elements of weather. You have to deal with anything that could be going on in the area that you're painting. For our last project, it was a really big project, and we had a very short amount of time to work on it. And it was the biggest project that I've ever worked on. It was 9,000 square feet. And so we had about 6 weeks to paint that. And we were really, really nervous. Originally, we said we needed 3 months, and it got boiled down to 6 weeks. And so we just had to be flexible and figure out how to make it work. So instead of working a regular 9 to 5 day, we worked like 8 a.m. until 8 p.m. We worked 12-hour days to make that work. But that was the flexibility that we had to be able to provide to make that project happen. And you mentioned it also during the intro. You mentioned budgeting for artists. And I think budget management is also a big part of these projects, because they're very exciting. It's very exciting to have a big budget project, but you also have to be well prepared to manage that budget and to do it well. It's hard sometimes at the beginning of a project to anticipate what all your costs will be. And we have seen during the pandemic that the costs of our materials have gone up dramatically, almost doubled in terms of what paint used to cost and what our materials used to cost pre-pandemic. They're a lot more expensive now. And so again, this last project that we worked on, we spent double what we had planned for in terms of our paint budget because we just needed more paint. And there was really no way that we could get around it. So you have to really have good budget management, be well prepared. And as you build your team, make sure that you have good people around you, people that share your vision and your values, and be able to delegate well.
Those are, I mean, those are great. Those are just really great skill sets, and I can see how each of them are so critical, you know, for an artist to have. You know, it's interesting how you talked about, like, you almost have to be prepared for anything, and you have to be so flexible, but also be organized and be able to try to at least put some parameters in place where you can kind of, you know, even though there's things outside of your control, you're still kind of seeing, you know, how you can mitigate those things. And so I can imagine, as an experienced artist, you know, there's probably a lot of things that you know now that you didn't know when you were starting out. You know, you were just starting out in the world of public art, and you know, those things you wish you knew. I'm wondering, what are the key lessons that you have learned as a public artist that you now, okay, you apply these lessons consistently across every new public art project you do?
So I think one of the things that I've learned over this last couple of years is just to be very, very patient. Sometimes these projects can take a lot of time, and some of those things are just completely out of our control. It's really challenging as an artist to plan your schedule. You know, we want to make sure that we have enough work, and that we don't have too much that we can't handle at any one given time. So I like to have a schedule for myself, but sometimes even when you know a project is going to happen, you have to wait until it's the right time. So I have a couple projects that started in 2020 and only just happened starting this year. So it was 2 years of planning and prepping and getting to the place where, okay, we're ready to go and we're ready to start. So just patience, because sometimes it can feel very frustrating and you might feel like you want to give up or you're ready to move on to something else. But I think just having patience and trusting the process, and just having really good communication, I think is really important. And then the other thing, well, there's lots of things that I can share, but definitely your network is a huge resource. Philly, we have so many artists. And a lot of artists from Philly have moved on and gone to other states. And so everyone that you know is a resource, whether they're an artist or not, because you might have a project where you really need someone who can give you advice as a general contractor. That comes up a lot in our work. And I am not a general contractor, but I really do need advice from people who know construction and know these kind of work sites. So just look into your network. If you ever have questions, if you have an idea of something that you want to do and you don't think you have the skill set to do it, I'd say go for it anyway. Put your ideas out there, because you can find people to work with that have that skill set as you build a team. But yeah, definitely your network is a resource and one of the things that you'll need to have when you work on public art projects is insurance. You need to have general liability and you need to have workers' compensation insurance. And this is something that we didn't always have in our studio. And we've, in the last couple of years, have to carry these policies. They're pretty expensive, but, you know, very necessary. And it just was really helpful to be able to ask other artists, hey, how did you do this? What company are you working with? How did you get this kind of insurance? Or, you know, asking people if they know fabricators when we have projects and we're using materials that we don't have expertise in.
That is great advice. I love some of the things you said about, being aware that these projects take time. I mean, public art projects, and I come from the world of planning and design on the architecture side of things. I'm also an artist, not a public artist. But when I came into the world of public art, I was so surprised at the fact that the amount of time it takes for a public art project is almost, depending on the size of a construction project, can be around the same time that it takes to, uh, construct a build or construct, maybe not a building, but construct a project. And it's because there's so many stages in the process of planning, even just the selection process, community engagement, time for fabrication, time for contracting. Contracting with the city takes a while, just to go through the city's process. So that was something that that's a great piece of advice to provide to people. And also, I love how you talked about building a team. That's so important, I think, for artists to realize that there's no project where it's expected for you to be able to have all the expertise, all the know-how, and you just like a one-person show. Even if you're the only artist on that team, there's still maybe a fabricator or a contractor, another type of, some other skill set that you're building your team. And that's definitely true. And that should make people feel more comfortable coming to the table, knowing that they don't have to know it all. You just have to have that vision. So that's great. Thanks for that. Linda, we'd love to hear more about some of your work. And we've got some great images here showing some of your projects. Can you share a couple of your favorite projects with us and talk about the impact that they had on the surrounding community?
Yeah, absolutely. So on the top left corner, this is a mural that is about the life and legacy of Robert N.C. Nix Jr. and Sr., father and son. The senior was the first Black congressman in the state of Pennsylvania, and his son was the first Black Supreme Court Chief Justice of Pennsylvania. And so they're this amazing legacy family that have had such a huge impact in our state and in our city. And we got to meet the sons of Robert N.C. Nix Jr., and we got to speak with them and learn more about these two people as individuals and just who they were as a father and as a grandfather. So that was really special to get to meet their family. And as we were creating this mural in their honor, this is over on 16th and Jefferson Streets. And it's painted on the side of a building, a housing development that is named after them. Named after the senior. So that was pretty amazing. We did host community paint days for this mural, and the sons got to paint and their grandchildren got to paint. So the great grandchildren, like so many different family generations have been involved in the creation of this mural. So that was really, really impactful. And the next one to the right, on the little house, that's over at Walden School in Media, PA. I was working as an artist in residence with this school, their Montessori school. And I was leading workshops with the students, asking them to think about symbols that represent their identity and their culture. For really young kids, that's a difficult concept to grasp. So I asked them to think about what are some things that they like and what's a symbol that represents them. So each of these little painted squares is completely painted by the kids from first grade through 8th grade. And this is just the front of the building. There's a couple more around the side of the building. And that was just a really special project to work on because none of the paintings were done by me. They were all done by the students. So this is something that they can come back to in the future and look at, when they're older and have a piece of public art that they were a part of creating. The one to the right, top right-hand corner, that is a mural called Farming in Harmony, and that's at the Rodale Institute, which is up near Kutztown, PA. The Rodale Institute is an organic, well, they're like an organic farm, but they're like some of the leaders in organic regenerative agriculture. And the mural is meant to represent the story of regenerative organic agriculture, which we didn't know anything about prior to painting this mural. So a lot of research went into the creation of the mural. We actually were able to stay in the founder's house and learn about the Rodale Institute, their history, the family, the Rodale family, and just do a lot of research to create this mural that has lots and lots of layers that tells the story of organic regenerative agriculture. And also for us, you know, it really made a big impact on how our understanding of food justice. That has been a really important theme within our work. So this mural kind of gave us some more context into understanding that work. The mural on the bottom left-hand corner is called Del Pasado al Futuro. And this is one that we just painted in Providence, Rhode Island this past spring. This is the mural that's 9,000 square feet. It is on the parking structure behind a federal courthouse. And this was our first Percent for Art mural for the state of Rhode Island. And let's see, we were able to hire 2 local artists from Providence to work on this mural, as well as 2 artists that we have worked with in the past, one from Philly and one from Puerto Rico. So we had a team of 6 artists all together working on this mural. And this is the one we painted in a month. It's the biggest mural I've ever worked on. We had to use 3 swing stages to create it. And we painted it directly onto the wall. So a lot of our murals are painted on polytab and then we install them. And actually the first 3 murals that I spoke about were all on polytab. So those were produced in our studio and then we brought them on site to be installed. But this one in Providence, this was painted directly onto the wall. So different process and also different time constraints. The polytab allows us to not have to worry about weather, but when you're painting on the wall, you know, you're praying for sunny days, you're praying for good weather, and especially that project that we had to paint within 6 weeks, we actually got it done within 4 weeks. So we really put in the time working 12-hour days. And then the last project on the bottom right-hand corner, this is one which we are producing right now. It's behind me. And this is going to be at Man Rivera Rec Center in North Philly on 5th and Allegheny. So this is the design for that project. We have done lots of community engagement, several virtual workshops with the community and also in-person workshops where we have asked people in the community to come up with symbols that represent their culture and the culture of the Fair Hill community. So I'm super, super excited for this mural to come to fruition this year, and just very honored to be able to create this kind of work in our city.
These are such great projects. Thank you so much for sharing, Linda. You know, obviously they're beautiful, but what's even more, you know, wonderful about them is the meaning behind them and the stories that they tell, and especially how the community was involved in the creation of most of them, if not all of them. And I know at the bottom right, the Man Rivera project, we have enjoyed working with you and Kier on that project. Very excited, as we were talking before we started this Zoom, about seeing the work even as it's in progress behind you, and you know, can't wait for this to be installed soon. Okay, well, with that, at this time, I like to pause and open the floor to questions from our audience. And so to ask a question, please use the raise your hand feature located at the bottom menu of your Zoom window. And when you're called on, you'll be unmuted to ask your question. If you don't want to ask your question out loud, you can type your question in the chat. It's the hosts can view that. I can view that, and Linda can view that. I think Linda can see it. And so we will answer those questions that we're receiving in the chat as well. But we're going to first ask people to raise their hand. And we have a lot of people in the audience. So I'm just going to remind you, just to ensure as many questions as possible get answered, we ask you to keep your questions brief into tonight's topic. So I'm going to ask Stephanie Fuentes to help us with Q&A now. And Stephanie's going to unmute people in the order that they raise their hand and so that they can ask their question.
Yep. Lily Meyer, you should be able to unmute yourself and ask your question.
Hi, my question is for both of you really, and I'm just wondering if you can speak to if you have any recommendations for how emerging artists who don't yet have established portfolios of public art projects can find opportunities to apply for public art projects or large scale projects aside from the Philadelphia Percent for Art program.
Linda, do you want to take that? And then I can also add.
Well, I would say if you don't yet have a portfolio together, then you could reach out to organizations like Amber Art and Design. You could volunteer with us just to get a little bit of experience working on a public project. And where to look for opportunities, we look for a lot of opportunities on a website called Cafe, Call for Artists, Call for Entries. And you can make a profile there and you can search for opportunities through that website. But I would definitely suggest, if you know any public artists, to offer to volunteer or see if they have opportunities for assistance where you could work with them so that you can gain some of the skills, but also so that you would have something for your portfolio where you could say that you worked on this project. You know, that would definitely help.
Yeah, that's great advice, Linda. I would also add that, you know, as an emerging artist, you know, you should definitely have at least a portfolio or some examples of your, you know, your studio work, or if there's things that you've done that are maybe a smaller scale, but you can talk about how you're going to, you know, work with partners to get that smaller scale vision larger. So for example, you know, we've had Percent for Art applicants who were graphic designers, beautiful work, but had not done a mural yet. And they work with a muralist or mural company to, you know, transfer their beautiful, the idea was that they were going to work with this muralist company to transfer their beautiful graphic design to the wall. And they had a team, like I mentioned before, of other, you know, fabricators and people on their team that would help them to realize their vision. So all we need is that, you know, to show that you have that vision, and then you have the capacity of the team to make it happen. Any other questions?
Thank you, Lily. We have Seema. You should feel free to unmute yourself and ask your question.
Hi, thanks so much. And thanks for hosting the webinar. My question is, you know, you're with a lot of the projects you were talking about, community engagement and how that is part of the process of making some of the art. With those types of projects, do you really only apply for, I guess, RFQs? Because an RFP, you would have to already develop something to show them. Are you limited in terms of what you can apply for?
So I want to make sure I answer your question correctly. So in terms of projects that you're engaging the community in some of the creation of the art, I would say for Percent for Art, you're not limited. You want to have an idea when you're applying to the Percent for Art opportunity. You would talk about how you plan on engaging the community in the creation of artwork. So for example, if it's a project where, say, you're doing mosaics, and you're going to be working with, you know, teenagers or working with school kids or the community to create, you're going to do a workshop to teach them how to create the mosaics, or you're going to do a workshop where they're going to draw out the ideas. and you're going to walk them through that process of drawing out ideas for the artwork that then you would create the mosaics. So there's no limit on the types of engagement that you can do for us for art, and we encourage that that artists work with the community as much as possible.
Thanks.
Sure. That's a great
Linda,
question.
did you want to add anything to that?
No, I think that Marguerite had a really good response, because that's been my experience. Is most of the requests for proposals, we can just describe how we plan to do the engagement. But I will also just add to that one thing that I didn't mention, and it just started to come up to me as I'm thinking about proposals, is the importance of having a well-designed and good-looking proposal, because your art can look really good and you can write very well, but presentation is very important, I think. And we have noticed that once we started creating more visually good-looking applications and proposals, we're getting a lot more opportunities. So just to keep that in mind too, that the presentation of your proposal is also really important to consider.
That was great, Linda. That's huge. I would agree. Very important.
Yeah, in a way, it's learning how to give a really good pitch to what your idea is, and not just showing what it's going to look like, but being able to explain what it's going to look like as well.
Yeah.
Okay, we did get some questions through the chat, and I want to read one that came in fairly early on. This question is asking, when seeking funding for a public art project, how should you go about estimating cost if the location and creative concept is initially uncertain?
Linda,
Yeah.
you want to take that one?
It's a tricky one. It's a really tricky one. So I think you should always have a certain amount, some budgets allow for 5 to like 10% of unanticipated costs. So definitely build that into your budget, because you will probably use all of it. And I think over time, as you build a repertoire of different large scale projects, you kind of get a sense of how much things will cost in terms of not only the materials, but the time to produce them. So yeah, it's difficult to predict sometimes, but I would also just suggest like asking people that you know. It's hard for me to answer this question because there's so much that I would need to know, but usually like what helps me come up with a budget is knowing the size of the wall. In general, you know, like if we use paint, and the paint that we use comes from California and it's very expensive. So if we need to restock all of our paint, that's, we have a set price for that, and it could range between $5,000 to $10,000 just for painting supplies. So yeah, it is hard to predict, but I would just suggest asking other people and trying to get as much information as you can. And just having that discretionary budget can really help.
Linda, do you also work with or have, like you mentioned before, contractors or other people, fabricators, who can also give you estimates and things in terms of how much their labor and fabrication could cost?
Yeah, sometimes in a proposal, we have to think about fabricators that we might want to work with if we're working in a medium that is not something we have expertise in. So we will actually do interviews and call different fabricators and get quotes from them so that we can create our budget.
That's great.
That's really helpful. There's a question asking about what are any upcoming opportunities, which we'll actually answer when we wrap up tonight's meeting. And then Linda, if you know what that website is, cafe, would you be able to share that in the chat?
Yes. let
Or
me
if you know what the website is.
Yes, I think it's cafe.org. No, that's not it. Hold on, let me find it. Callforentry.org. Yeah, I'll put that in the chat.
Thank you.
Great question. So one of the question is, if most of your projects have been smaller budgets, how do you frame your proposals to start getting bigger budget projects? And then there's a follow-up question about insurance we'll ask later. So how do you move from working on a smaller scale project and budget to being able to scale upwards for, larger projects?
This is something that honestly took us years. And I would just say, keep applying, keep trying. Sometimes you might not be able to grow from a $10,000 project to a $30,000 project as quickly as you would like. But as you continue to create work, you will get there eventually. But I don't think there's like a secret recipe, unfortunately. I think sometimes what I've noticed is that a lot of times funders want to be able to see that you've been able to manage a larger budget project. So just keep applying. If you have a $10,000 project and you want to get to that 30,000 and you're just not getting there, apply to the 12,000, apply to the 15,000. It might take a little bit of time. And, it's taken us 10 years to get our first percent for art project. So it's not something that might it might happen for you within a year, and then congratulations, that will be amazing. But it definitely takes time. And I think that's where some of the patience comes into play. So just stay patient, keep doing the work, keep making work, and eventually you will be able to get the projects that you want and the projects that are meant for you.
I'm going to switch back to hands that are raised, and then I'll go back to the chat. So Rosa, if you want to ask your question.
Hi, thanks. Linda, thanks for that expansive definition of what you consider public art. I'm a landscape architect. I don't have public art training or formal art training of any kind past high school, but I love the idea of getting involved in public art and creating spaces that are focused on art rather than just what we typically do as landscape architects, which is a little different. What are your thoughts on that? Like on someone that doesn't have a formal art background, kind of breaking into public art space?
Yeah, it's funny that you mentioned that. So through some of the work that we've been doing over the last couple of years, we've been connected with a lot of landscape architects, and we've been asked to be a part of their team on some various projects. So I think that maybe that's an idea of, inviting artists into some of the projects that you're working on. The way that we started was we worked on a project at the Hatfield House up in Strawberry Mansion. And we approached the city's Fairmount Park Conservancy to ask them about, hey, how can we do an artist residency in this house? It's a historic house that was not open to the public, but we saw it as a potential resource and community hub and center for art and creativity. And so we had a residency there that lasted for a couple of years, and we were able to invite community members to be a part of, thinking up what kind of programming should happen in that space. So it was kind of this merger between architecture, as the city was also thinking about what to do with that space, and public art. So I think that there is lots of opportunities, and, please follow up with me after this talk, because I would love to learn more about the work that you do.
Cool, thanks.
One question that came in through the chat is if there are restorations or repairs eventually needed, who or how is that taken care of? So we can speak particularly to the Percent for Art program, any projects that are part of the city's collection of work. It is a small budget, but we have a budget where we do take care of maintenance, especially if there's graffiti or heaven forbid, someone crashes into it. There are funds available that we take care of on a yearly basis, projects depending on their range of need and where they're located and when the last time they were maintained, but we have that capacity within the city.
Yeah. And Stephanie, I would also add to that, one of the things that we look for, we the city look for is, that durable quality and that long lasting quality of the artwork that's being proposed. And that's one of the actual selection criteria, because it is sometimes a limited budget that we have to work with to, maintain all, over 1,100 pieces in the city's collection. So as we're constantly adding more new art, we want to make sure that it's, really long lasting, because it's out, most of the time it's out in the elements and just subject to all things that you can think of, like Stephanie mentioned, things getting crashed into.
Stephen, Oliver, go ahead and ask your question.
Thanks, Phil. First of all, thanks for having this. Very informative, and it's great to see someone else's work out there. In some short experience, I wanted to ask. This is sort of directed a little bit at the city, and you might even want to answer it towards the end. But when you apply to something, I'm already seeing that. Like, wouldn't it be incredible if the city or whatever entity you're applying to has kind of everything in their package? So like if it's, first of all, there's a proposal and the requirements, parameters, budget. But if there is like, okay, I've got to get insurance, I haven't done that before. Or if there is some public works person or something I need to meet with, to have all the point people and all the things on a sheet so that person knows exactly what they're getting into and they can just go right in. I'm just curious as to what the city of Philadelphia does.
That's a great question. One thing that we do, and Stephanie could probably speak to this, is, for helping artists that may not be familiar with labor rates, for example, we provide, a list of different types of laborers, day laborers, fabricators, contractors, and typical like union prevailing wage rates in the city, an hourly rate that artists can use as they're trying to figure out, okay, how much is this labor going to cost in my budget? So certain types of those things we also provide to artists that are applying to projects.
Mm-hmm.
Anything else you can think of?
I would also say prior to any of our artists creating these proposals, we do have an in-depth meeting telling them of all the materials that we are asking for and all of the areas in their proposal that they will need to respond to. And it's something that we give to them far in advance, and it's just a guide that's helpful for them so that what they're preparing is as strong of a proposal that they can in order to describe what their concept is. So we do want to give them as much information up front as possible. And then also there's always a time for Q&A that, let's say that meeting is over, but then they have follow-up questions about the site specifically. And sometimes these questions get really technical. So we refer and we depend on the design team, like members of the design team that are working around the site or who have more technical experience than we do to be able to respond to those questions. So we do as much as we can to inform the artists prior to them presenting anything.
Yeah. Thanks, Stephanie.
Thank you, Stephen. There was a follow-up question actually that I missed earlier, which was if you have any recommendations for insurance that when people are trying to get, I guess, that liability insurance, how would you go about doing that?
Should I answer that one?
Yeah, take that, Linda.
So we had a company that we were working with for a couple of years. And then when we got the project in Rhode Island, that company wasn't able to help us get the type of coverage that we needed because the wall was very, very tall. So we were kind of fumbling and struggling for a minute trying to find somebody who could help us. And it was actually our project manager in Rhode Island who recommended somebody to us. So now we're working with Walpert, and they are based in Rhode Island, but they have a lot of knowledge about working on artist projects. So that's the agency that we work with. They're called Walpert, and they search out different policies that would work for us based on the kind of projects. And yes, I can drop the name in the chat.
And I would say the other place to start is with your own insurance provider, whether you're using them for renters insurance, vehicle insurance, house, home insurance. Just initiate the conversation with them and see if that's something that they can even add to your policy, depending on what the project you are applying for, what you're working on needs. But we've heard from some other artists that we've worked with that was where they started, and it led to a fairly easy expansion for whatever they needed at the time.
Yeah.
I know that there's also websites where, and I can't remember what it's called, but if you do a quick Google search, there are websites for artists to get insurances. Like sometimes you need insurance just for like a 1-day install or 1-day project. And so you can get the less expensive, maybe it's $100 or $200 policy that covers you for like a smaller outdoor project.
Yeah, this is great answers. I would just add one last thing that, the city is very clear, in terms of the type of insurance that's needed, and that's provided up front even before, artists are responding to a call, what their insurance requirements are as part of the, as part of the information that's given up front. So that's also helpful. You don't have to guess what's needed for a specific project.
One question that came through is and this is more so towards us, the city, is do you match artists' community-minded concepts to specific communities and locations in the city? Or do communities come to you looking for artists?
So each project, so Present for Art, for example, it's a project, a construction or renovation project that's happening, like, for example, at a library or a rec center or a city civic space where the city is funding that construction. And that's what triggers the Present for Art project, which is requiring 1% of that budget, 1% of that project budget to be designated to site-specific art. So we have the community already because we know where the project is going to go. And we're looking for artists that either come from that community, have some connection to that community, or are able to engage that community in, really telling that story, that community's story in the art. And so we're looking for, when you're proposing, that you talk about that relationship or that intended engagement that you're going to do with the community. Does that answer your question? You can put in the chat, or if you're, if that does. Okay.
Don't see any other new questions. We are at 6:30. Please let us know if if there was anything that we did miss, or if you want further explanation on a response.
Yeah, we have a couple of other slides, and so maybe we can
Yeah, let's do
on
that.
those.
We'll wrap around to questions in case there were any missed.
Yeah. And those were great questions, by the way. Thank you for everyone who submitted a question. So we want to do a poll. We just have one last question after today. Would you apply to a future Present for Art opportunity? And the choices are yes, no, not sure yet, but I want to learn more. And don't forget, when you respond, hit submit.
The results are rolling in. We'll give it about another 5 seconds. Okay.
Okay, wonderful. Look at that. It's wonderful. So for those that say yes, which is great, we've got some upcoming public art opportunities for you, and which we're going to talk about. And then also those who say not sure yet, that's great too. You know, this is just the beginning. This is session 1, you know, in the series, workshop 1, and we're looking forward to hosting more professional development workshops to demystify the public art process so that, you know, you as an artist feel equipped to be successful to apply and to do public art projects. So thanks for responding to that. Okay, so here are just a few upcoming public art opportunities, and the general timing for when the call for artists will be distributed. So in November, towards the end of this month, the African American Historic Statue at City Hall, call for artists will be distributed. In January, the Blanche A. Nixon Library, Percent for Art, which is a rebuild project, renovation at that library. That will be, the call for artists will be distributed in January 2023. And in February 2023, the Broad Germantown Erie Percent for Art project, which is connected to renovation and construction that's happening at the intersection of Broad Germantown and Erie, will launch that call for artists. So this is a diversity of different projects. What we want you to do is please, you know, if you haven't signed up on our mailing list to receive information about public art opportunities, please do so. Please continue to check our website, which is on our next slide at creativephl.org for specific information about these projects. Once there's a call for artists that's announced, there's, as Stephanie mentioned, there's an artist information meeting that's held for each project to walk interested artists through the public art opportunity and the application process. So with that, that concludes our program tonight. Thank you for joining us. And thank you to our guest, Linda Fernandez, for sharing your public art experience and stories with us tonight. I know everyone has learned something that's invaluable, and we're just looking forward to continuing doing these sessions. At creativephl.org and sign up on our mailing list to receive information about future opportunities and the next quarterly workshop in the Public Art Where to Start series. Thank you, everyone. Have a good night.
Thank you, everyone. Take care.
Right. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Linda.